What's up YouTube, and welcome to another draw along with me, where today I'm going to show you using Procreate how you can create this awesome space themed landscape. Now, as always, there's links to everything you're going to need for today's design in the requirements of the description down below. You'll be able to find the canvas size I've used, as well as the palette, so you can follow along with the exact same colors. And there's one additional brush in here as well, which you're going to need, but I've got a super handy, super easy video on how you can install brushes into Procreate. It's really simple to do. Now, as always, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more Procreate content. Make sure to share your designs with me when you're done, either on Instagram or Discord, and also check out my Patreon. There's a link in the description down below where I post 3 more exclusive tutorials every single month to my Patreon supporters, where they get sneak peeks, early access, and much more. So check that out in the description down below. Enjoy today's design, and with all that said, let's get started. So once you've created your canvas size, the first thing I want to do is go up to the actions. We're going to go ahead and go to the canvas tab and turn on a drawing guide and edit that drawing guide. And I'm going to set the grid size, as I traditionally do, to 1/4 of the canvas, which for me is 500, and hit done. That way we have a 1x1 grid, so you can work out where I'm laying things out against the grid on your screen. Rather than guesstimating it, we can use the grid. And I'm also going to go ahead and just change it to a pretty nice random color. I'm going to grab like a pink color here, and I'll just boost the opacity so you can see it on screen, because we're going to use some light colors and dark colors. It'll be nice to have a nice vibrant one so we can see that on the screen. Now, the first thing we're going to go ahead and do is create our little area here for the lake, and then also the land masses that are around it. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my colors first of all, and I'm going to grab this color here, the 4th color on that top row. It's only temporary. We're going to go ahead and grab our selection tool. We're going to use the rectangle option here, and we're going to turn on the option of color fill, which will allow us to then draw a box and then let go, and it'll fill the color in. Now we're looking roughly around about sort of 1/4 up from here, if not slightly higher. So around about 1/4 up in that 3rd row, and then let go. And then tap on your selection tool when you're done. That's going to be essentially where our land mass or water mass is going to be. Let's go ahead though and tap on it on the layer and invert it to the opposite. So it's going to be this kind of green color. Again, completely temporary. It's just for so we can see the difference against all the different elements we're going to create. And you can rename this if you want to. You can just call it lake. We're then going to go ahead and create a new layer. We're going to go to our colors, and we're going to grab this color here in the top left of the palette. We're going to go to our brush, and we're going to go ahead and go into the option of organic. And you can see I've got a wild grass rotated 90, and we've got the regular wild grass. I'm actually going to swipe that to the left and duplicate it and show you how I rotated it. So I'm going to swipe it to the left and duplicate it. I'm going to tap on the actual brush itself to go into the studio, and we're going to go ahead and go to the option of shape here, and we're going to go ahead and tap on the shape source, and all we want to do is rotate this. So with 2 fingers, we're just going to spin to the right and rotate it that way and hit done. That way now it should be in the more upright position when you hit done, and when you draw across, there we go, we've got that little bit of a lean to the right, but that's also dependent on how you lean your brush as well. So we're going to go ahead and set this to something quite small. Now this is going to be the main land down here. So you can set it to around about the 8 to 10% range. So you get some nice large blades of grass. And all I want you to do is create a little area of land that's going to go roughly around about midway over here to about midway at the bottom down here. So I'm just going to draw across now. I'm going to go horizontal just so I get the blades of grass, and then I'm going to just let that run down into here like so and fill that in. And then I'm just going to reduce the brush size down to maybe around about 5% and just sort of refine the shape a little bit more. Add in some areas of grass just in the smaller gaps. Now we've got a nice varying amount of land. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to this layer. We're going to tap on it and we're going to alpha lock it. We're going to go to our brush and change it to the option of airbrushing and the soft brush. And we're going to keep that brush size around about 10%. And all we want to do from the bottom is just overlap it really lightly. So what we're looking to do is we're looking to keep a little bit of the purple color that you can see in the actual wild grass brush, and keep that on the edge only, so that top surface. So now I'm just making sure that the very bottom edge down here is nice and dark, and just leaving a little bit of purple right on the end there where a little bit of light's coming through, and it's just creating that nice hue of the purple tones. Let's then go ahead now and create a new layer and drag it underneath the one we were just working on, because that one now is completely done. We're going to go ahead and create the one area of land first of all that goes all the way edge to edge before we create another little land mass over here. So we're going to go to our colors, and we're going to go ahead and grab the 3rd color on the top row here. My brush, I'm going to set it to calligraphy, and I'm going to set it to the monoline brush. The monoline brush for me has some good stabilization and streamline to it. You can see that there in the streamline and stabilization. Feel free to change it to whatever you want. We may tinker with that later on because I want to get some nice bumps and lumps for the land masses. And I've set the size down to 1%, so it's nice and small. Now what we're looking to do is essentially just run along that edge here of the water, and then as you get a little bit sort of over here, just sort of swooping down a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead, for example, and go all the way along here, and it doesn't need to be anything dramatic. Just as you get a little bit closer down here, just bring that down just a tiny bit. And then we're going to go ahead and create the top of the land, kind of like a hill, and it's going to come in from around about sort of a quarter down, maybe even a third down in that third row there, and we're going to go along that land again, but it's going to drop down to around about here very quickly. So you're going to go from that point there essentially all the way up to the top. So I'm going to come in from up here. You can always adjust it later on, don't fret over it too much, and then just run along here quite straight if possible, and then drag and drop your color into that space, and that's going to allow us to just nicely frame our lake. Now what we can also do is, again, while we're here, we can just sort of make some adjustments. We can add some bumps, maybe even some rocky shapes in there. It's totally up to you. Just get in there and just tidy up any little areas that you need to, color them in. But again, just create little areas of detail should you wish, you know, like a big rock maybe here. And this is where you may want to reduce that stabilization down just so that you can get some extra little detail in there. But that looks okay to me for the minute. I'm just going to add in some jitters in here just to get rid of those super smooth lines. And let's get rid of this big curve here as well, till you end up with maybe something like this. Again, we can always come back, we can always tweak this as much as we like based on how we'll set the layers up. So we've now got that area of land in play. Let's then go ahead and create a new layer, and we want it to sit above the one we just created. We're going to go to our colors, and we're going to grab the second color in the palette on that top row. These four are very similar to each other, so don't worry about the fact that you might not be able to see one against the other. So the second color on that top row. We're going to go back though to the layer we were just working on and just tap on it and bring the opacity down to about 50%, so we can see the work we're doing now on our new empty layer, and then we'll bring the opacity back up. Now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and create a little bit of land that's going to come in from around about up here. So around about sort of 3/4 up in there, and we're going to go to around about sort of here, and we're going to have quite like a swoop down. That's temporary, but quite a swoop down to create those little areas of, again, another hill into the land running down. And then it's also going to exit just slightly lower here. Now you can make little dots like this, especially when you're following my tutorials. You can make these little dots where I am so that you can just work out where you want to be and how you want to get to point. So I'm just now going to just run this down, and I want this to run into a really flat, very flat sort of point at the end here. Again, we can always get back in there and sort of adjust that in a moment. And we're going to very quickly come sort of swooping down here into a landmass, and then down into a thin area of land. And then we'll drag and drop the color in. We'll grab our eraser where necessary and tap on your eraser and change it to, say, calligraphy as well in the monoline brush, and just tidy up any edges. Now I've got a little lump there on the end of the land, and I'm just going to sharpen that up as well. I want that to really sort of just fade down into the water so it gets really thin there on the point. Taking a look at everything else, can we make any other adjustments? I think, to be honest with you, it's pretty good. We could otherwise just make the brush size a little bit bigger and maybe introduce some adjustments here. Now this is going to end up quite dark down in here anyway, so you don't need to add in too much, but just in case you want to get rid of that quite sort of smooth, sort of very straightforward monoline lining in there, we can just add some little bumps and lumps in here, just to sort of give the land a tiny bit of character. And I'm really only adding in just literally a couple of pixels worth of detail, just to see if we can just bring out a little bit more character in it. But that looks pretty good to me. We're going to leave that as is. And we can now go back to the last layer we were working on, the previous one that we dropped all the way down to 50%, and bring that up to its maximum opacity again. So now we've built our lake out, and you can see how it sort of rolls round into maybe over here where maybe it wanders off, maybe it goes into a waterfall or something. Let's then go ahead and create another new layer and drag it underneath the other hill over here on the right. So it's just in front of your lake. Go to your colors and go ahead and grab the fourth color on that top row. And then once you've done that, I'm going to go up to my brush. I'm going to go back to the monoline now and the stabilization. I'm going to bring that down. I'm just going to half everything down So I'm just going to bring it roughly around to halfway so I can get some, again, much needed sort of jitters and lumps and bumps. Now, with the brush set to, again, that 1% brush size, what we're looking to do is we're looking to add a peak roughly around about here. That's going to be the main sharpest point. And again, it's going to run down to around about here where it's going to start to flatten down. It's going to run all the way sort of parallel to this land. These are temporary lines. And then we're also going to add in like another spiky sort of land mass here. And then once you get to about here, then we're going to get really, really sharp up to that point and then let that sort of dip in behind. Again, those are very temporary. I don't want you to draw those in just yet like that, but we can add our little sort of markers if you wish. So I'm going to add a marker sort of here, a little dot. I'm also going to add in a little dot that's going to run down to around about here. And then I'm going to add in another one that just makes its way to about there. And then I know that I can also make a little dot here. So essentially we've got to join these dots together, just like when we were children with art books. You can go ahead and just make those dots, but as we go we can add some fun details. So let's start over here first of all, and I want to come from behind this landmass here. So I'm going to start over here and draw in until I can see my line. Now I know that that is definitely connected to the edge of the canvas. I can now go ahead and create some sort of very rocky sort of textures, and essentially the natural jitters of your pen should be enough to just make enough of a rocky kind of look to it. Don't worry about perfecting it first time either. We will come into this in a minute and really hack away with it. Now, because we are what I'm imagining on like another planet, I want the landscape to be really quite dramatic and harsh over here in the distance. The landscape takes a turn from the rolling hills and gets really, really, really sharp, and then just makes its way down towards here. So you can see I've added some really large spiky points in there. We're going to, again, run along here. So I'm going to try and keep this one as smooth as possible. So I'm going to do it quite fast across there. And then once we get to there, I've got my other landmass on the left. And again, I want that to be nice and sort of bumpy and lumpy and quite sharp and aggressive. But I also don't want to sort of mimic too much the land that sits in front of it. So I want to just create as much sort of variation in the character, like so. Now, what you're then going to need to go ahead and do is just simply go ahead and see this line that we created on the layer in front. I'm going to put my pen down and I'm drawing as of now, and I'm drawing all the way through that dark line. So I'm going from edge to edge. So I've created a line. If I was to turn that layer off in front, you can see I've drawn a line edge to edge, where I can now drag and drop the color into the shape we previously just created. Now it's up to you. You can do it at this point and tweak to your heart's content. You can grab your eraser, tap on your eraser and change it to something such as, we can go into the textures and rectango. I'm really enjoying this brush at the minute for creating some very sort of bumpy, lumpy landscapes. If you were to set this to something really small, maybe like 1%, you could go ahead here, and that might be even too small. We can go up to a 2% and kind of just hack away at the edge of the land, like so, using the rectangle and its randomness to create some quite sharp, quite aggressive changes. Now I'm going to remove that 2% mark. I want to go for a large 1%, and you can just pick and choose where you want to. I just want to give you those options so that you can just get in there if you want to and adjust the landscape. Truthfully, I'm pretty happy with how that landscape worked out first time, so I'm actually going to leave it. And we're going to move on to some of the hills in the background. So again, we're going to create another new layer. We're going to drag it down. Now for a moment, what I want you to do before our layers start to get a little bit more built up, we've got the empty layer we just created and all the land masses above it. And you can see I'm swiping from left to right on all of those. And you should have 5 in total. And we're just going to go ahead and we're going to group them together. It'll make life easier later on. And then on this empty layer here, we're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and move into these greens. So the colors really transition now. We're going to grab this green here at the top of that 6th column, I believe. And we're going to go back, making sure our brush is the monoline. Now at this point, because the landscape's getting a little bit further away, I'm going to go back into the monoline and bring the stabilization, etc. back up to what it was. So it's max and around about 50 and hit done. Now, same brush size, 1% at its smallest value. All we're going to do now is create another set of hills. Now, these ones are getting further back and they're going to be a little bit more rolly. Now here, where this line is, I want that to be a bit of a peak. It's going to essentially swoop down into here and then just create sort of random hills as you wish. Essentially, it's going to be like this. So we'll get rid of that and we'll start drawing in our landscape. Now I'm going to go ahead and again, make sure I draw right over here on the left. I'm going to come in from here and then just sort of create a little bit of a peak And again, I can tidy that up, or I can get in there now and just try and link that together a little bit better. Again, I want the land to swoop down into sort of what I'm imagining is just a really flat plane here in the middle. Maybe that comes back up again and we create some more rounding. But again, slightly sharp hills. You can really have some fun. Now try to just run that into a flat area here. You should never run a line, for example, into a corner. So if I was to go into here and go into this corner, you should avoid that at all costs. You want to run your other line into essentially a flat area. So I've run that into there, and I'm just going to go ahead and go from that point, go all the way to the edge to the right. And again, just like we did before, I'm going to start here on the edge, and I'm drawing as of now, and I'm running a straight line across the canvas in behind that land, left to right. So again, I can drag and drop the color into that space. We're going to go to our layers, create a new layer. Grab the last one we were working on, drag it above this empty layer. And then on the empty layer, we're going to go to our colors again. We're going to grab the middle color in that 6th column of greens. Again, create another set of hills. Now, things are getting further away. So essentially, whatever you made this peak here, really your landscape and your hills and everything else now should start to just fall a little bit sort of lower. We're slowly starting to flatten everything down. So again, I'm going to go ahead and come in from the edge over here. I can create like a little sort of an extra peak over here, and then let that run into here. And I'm just going to create some wobbly areas of land and go all the way into here. Now I've let go because I've had to, because of how I've positioned my pen. So I'm just going to go from this point here and go all the way to the edge. And again, I'm going to start drawing as of now and draw from the edge all the way across, left to right. So I can drag and drop the color into that space. And let's create one more set of hills. So we're going to go ahead and create another new layer and grab the last one we were working on and drag it above. We're going to go to that empty one underneath. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab the bottom color in that column. And we'll create our final set. Now, all this needs to be, we're going to come in from the side here, is just essentially like the odd little random peak that you may or may not be able to see just in the gaps, and then go all the way across. So I only managed to get 3 peaks out of that, and I'm cool with that. That's fine. Again, we're going to go from over here, we're going to go through the land, and we're going to go out the other side, edge to edge, so we can drag and drop the color into those hills. And that's it. You've done all of your land area and your land masses. What we can now do is work on the sky, and then we're going to come back to these layers, tweak them before we reflect them then in the water. So we're going to go ahead and we'll collapse this group down, keep things nice and tidy. We're going to go ahead and create a new layer and drag it underneath our lake. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab this color here, the bottom of the 3rd column from the right. We're going to drag it onto the screen. We're going to fill in that entirety of that space. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to start working on all the background elements. They will be separated layers for a temporary amount of time, and then you can merge them together afterwards. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to swipe from left to right on both of these and group them together. Then this empty layer, we're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab this one here in the very bottom right of the palette, and we're going to build up that sky. So we're going to go to our brush. We're going to go to the option of airbrushing, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to use the soft brush. Now, what we want to do is with the brush size probably around about sort of 10%, always looks pretty good. We want to go ahead and essentially leave the darkest area above this line here. So up here in the top area is going to be the darkest, and eventually fade down into the sunset. But with the dark skies, you don't always want to just leave it black. So what I'm doing really, really lightly, you probably can't even see it on the screen, and I can't really see it on mine, just to sort of justify it a little bit more, is I'm just very lightly now just squiggling my pen and building up levels of sort of blue and black. So I'm going to build up the pressure a little bit more now. So I'm just going to go ahead and actually fill this in at the bottom quite dark. So as in with colour. So quite a lot of sort of colour down here. And then everything above, I'm now just squiggling my pen, trying to create patchiness. I'm trying to create variation in the blue. I'm trying to create variation in the black. So you've got sort of very big areas of black at the top, but then everything in here has that kind of real patchiness to it. So let's just keep that going a little bit higher. And more so over here on the left, more of the colour is going to be situated down here in this left area here. So you can let all the blues and greens in a moment just sort of fade out over here on the right hand side a bit more. Let's move on from that particular setup of that layer. Let's go ahead and create a new layer. Let's go to our colours. We're going to move up to this colour here in the middle of that far right column. We're going to make our way up here and then down here. So the middle of the far right column, we'll keep the brush size as it is. And we're going to go ahead and just go round in a circle first of all, especially down here in the bottom left. We're going to add in a good amount of this color and then blend up this greeny kind of blue color, blending it up. So I'm just going to make the brush size a bit bigger, in fact, maybe around about 17%, just so I can create a really lovely gradient and transition. Notice how I've got a bigger, larger area of the color in this left area here, and how it fades off and just blends out over here on that right hand side, blending that up as well. And while we're here, just on the same layer for a moment, we'll grab this color here at the top right of the palette, and we will build on top of this again. So again, nice and blue down here, or nice and colorful, I keep saying blue, nice and colorful down here. And then we're going to blend that out. It's all about blending at this point, just create a really lovely gradient of all the colors that we're going to introduce up into our sky. And can overlap a little bit and just blend that out over here to the right hand side. Again, use my grid as a guide to where to position all the colors. And you can make it really nice and colorful down here at the bottom and over here on the left. Let's then transition into some of the sunny colors. So we'll create a new layer. We'll go to our colors and we'll grab this color here at the top of that second column from the right. And that's going to roughly run to this sort of line here. So you can go, for example, left to right here. And I've still got the brush size set to around about sort of 17 to 15% there. So I'm just going to block that in and then I'm going to blend it. I'm going to allow that just to blend up and overlap towards those blues, but create a lovely transition of the colors. And again, over here on the left, you can make it a little bit more circular because the sun's going down over here on the left. So we're just adding in a little bit more color over here, blending that up. Real gentle transition though of the colors. And over here too, you can just blend that up. If you made yours a little bit too solid like I have, you can just spend some time just fading that into the colors above. And I start to see that sunset come into life a little bit more now, and how it's going to nicely blend up into the sky. A little bit higher on this left hand side, that's perfectly fine. Let's then go ahead and create another new layer, and we'll go to our colors and grab the orange in the middle of that second column from the right, and we'll add in a lovely little bit of orange. Now that's going to run obviously just behind our hills here. I'm going to reduce the brush size because we're in a smaller area now, because you never want to go any higher necessarily than the color that you were last working on, especially with a sunset. So over here on the left, I'm going to circular motion that and then blend that out across the horizon. You're not really going to see too much over here because it's big land mass. So essentially you just need to create this gradient here, bit of orange in here, and blend that up towards the red tone previously. We're then going to go ahead and create another new layer, you guessed it. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab the yellow at the bottom of that second column from the right. And this one is going to primarily be over here. So just in behind here, and then a little bit behind our horizon there, and just a little bit behind it. We don't really want to blend this one up too much. We want to leave the yellow down here, nice and lovely and colorful. And then just behind your mountains there in the distance, creating that lovely gradient of color. Now at this point, what we can go ahead and do is we can also now start to add in further effects. So we've got our beautiful gradient. I urge you, if you want to, you can merge those together if you're concerned about your layers. If you're not, we'll carry on as normal. So we'll create another new layer. We'll go to our blend mode of this layer though, and we're going to change it to add. We're going to bring the brush size down to around about sort of 5 or 6, whatever you're most happy with, to control. And we're literally going to start to create a very sort of almost white and then yellowy kind of glow that's going to come in from here, in behind. And then you can just push that a little bit along the horizon, just the tiniest little bit, just right behind, just as if there's a big glow, and that's it. I wouldn't go too far over to the right, just primarily focus it over here on that left hand side, and you can make it really quite colorful if you add in like a good solid amount of color. Don't overdo it though. We don't want to sort of make it too bold too quickly. We're then going to go ahead and create a separate layer again, and now what we're going to do is we're going to build in some different streaks of color. And this is all going to be really a good balance of your pen pressure, etc. So we're going to go to our color and we're going to grab the top of the second column from the right. We're going to bring that brush size down to something nice and small. I've got it down to around about 3%. By the way, if you're ever interested, because you can see that circle on the end of my pen there with Procreate, what you can do is you can go up to your actions, you can go to preferences there and just turn on brush cursor. That way you'll be able to see the head of your brush, for example, like here, big circle, you can see that. So hopefully that makes life a little bit easier for you. But with a 2 or 3% brush size around about there, whatever you're most comfortable with, We're going to go ahead now and start to add in some lovely lines that are going to move across our sky. So I've got about 3%, and I'm looking for where that color is because we're using the sort of reddy pink, reddy peachy tone. And we're going to just sort of wiggle our pen along here up into the greens, and it's very, very subtle. I'm just very lightly, and that's what you want. You really want that subtleness. Don't overdo it. Don't press really bold like this and get a line like that. Keep it really, really light, and go back over your line a few times and create lovely sort of streaky, almost they're like the clouds in the sky, and just blend that across. You could end up with a little bit of a line like I've got there. So that was maybe me overlapping it a few times. I'm going to bring the brush size down to about 2% now, so I'm in a bit more control. And I'm going to just bring in a couple more along here, really, really light. You don't want to come too far down. I'm going to bring in another one here, and very, very lightly just adding in these squiggles. Now don't worry so much right now, because we're going to then do the same. We're going to bring the orange up and over the reds. So right now, if you're not seeing sort of too much area to add any content to, that's perfectly normal. Right now we're just going to sort of build up. We can add in a few streaks in the blues above, and it's all about then revisiting the colours of your sunset and your sky to then introduce additional sort of clouding effects. So we'll do exactly that. We'll go to our colours and we'll grab the orange in the middle of the second column from the right. And we're now going to overlap sort of the reds and expand the oranges up the sky. So now you can overlap the previous line. So I know my work is extremely subtle, and I can appreciate that might be a bit of a struggle to see, but I'm overlapping and cutting through some of the lines I just previously created to just add in now some orange. And you can really layer this up. You can really have some fun chopping away into the darker lines that you just created. You can also now overlap and into the reds a bit more, just to create streaky effects in the sky. You can bring that in from over here and wiggle your pen. Make sure to create nice wiggles and wobbles in here, so that's like the cloudy effect, just so it's not too perfect. You should end up slowly building up a lovely little sunset. And you can see I'm also, where I've got my darker lines, I'm adding in a little bit of orange on the underside, because the sun is underneath this area here. It's not up in the sky nice and high. So as I sort of drag these lines across, I'm kind of looking to maybe introduce a little bit of colour on the underside of some of those darker lines. And we're just going to keep tweaking, and you can make the brush size varying sizes as well. Try not to keep it too similar. And so I'm going to, in these areas over here, I'm going to now introduce some additional sort of streaks along the sky. And we can even add in some yellow if we want to. I really urge you to spend as long or as little as you like on here. If you want to spend as long as you like, just sort of adding in a really beautiful sky and really streaky, it will just really add to the final effect. But I can appreciate it may take a little bit of time. But when we get to the stage where we're going to reflect our design, that's where your sort of design needs to be kind of locked in and ready to go. So we do have the rest of the sky to make in a moment, and so you do have time to come back to this should you wish. Now make the call on your own here. You can switch to the yellow here at the bottom of the second column from the right, and you can add in some yellow like here, just in the distance a little bit more, a little bit smaller. I say make the call because it's totally dependent on how much maybe color you added previously in your little gradient section of this. So when we were doing the gradient in the background, a gradient is a blend, if you didn't already know, between multiple colors. So it's just that blending effect between them. So I'm just getting in there now, seeing what I can add. That last one was a little bit too, I'm going to bring the brush size even smaller, down to a 1%. The last one was a little bit too large, so I'm just going to get in there. You can always go ahead and, again, do the underside then of some of those orange areas. So you're really like brightening up kind of the underside of some of these clouds in the sky. But we want the pressure extremely light, because we don't want to make this like a, too much of a dramatic sky scene. We just want it to be subtle. We just want it to be like it's a really soft evening sunset. You don't have to do it underneath every single cloud. You can also just run in random brighter lines here and there, and it's really coming together. That looks pretty cool. And you'll also be able to see in a second that I'm not going to sort of keep doing this for too long. I'm just going to keep adding in a little bit of detail, and when I think we've got a good enough sort of impression of what I want to try and achieve, we're going to move on, and which will be exactly now. So let's do exactly that. Let's move on, and we're going to add in some variation into the sky. So we created the gradient up there with the blues, etc. we can then also add in some variation up there with some nebula brushes. So where we've got this area here with all the teal and blues, teal and green, should I say, let's create a new layer in front of that. Let's then go to our colors and grab the color in the top right of the palette. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to go ahead and go to the option of, we're going to go to luminance. For you, it will say luminance. For me, I don't know why it says that. I changed it a long time ago. We've got the nebula brush here, and I've set the opacity to about 55 or 50%. Size-wise, I've got it set to about 7, and that looks pretty good. And I've set the opacity lower because if we set that to 100% and we get drawn in there, you get to these crazy bright colors too quickly. And again, just like the clouds, we want to build up that color. So what I'm trying to introduce at this point is I want to add in some variation of the greens further higher into the darker tones. So now I'm just going to very lightly just sort of squiggle my pen. Again, it's all about light pressure with this. So just really, really lightly, and you should then start to see these little areas of patches of colour. We've just got the variation in there. Feel free to add them in the green areas though, like you don't have to just do it in the darker areas above. You know, have some fun here, creating some fun nebula, spacey, themed aesthetic to your sky. And then we are going to go ahead and create a new layer and drag it underneath that last one we were just working on. Then go to your colors and grab the bottom right color in the palette, or even the middle one here in the far right. Let's go middle in the far right. Brush size about 5 or 6 again, and then we're working with a slightly darker tone now, so you should be able to start to get some more like bluer tones rather than the green, and feel free to again bring them over here on top of the green. So we're underneath the green nebula, but we're on top of the green gradient in the background, so you should be able to just nicely just create some fun, very galaxy-like effects in the sky here. Again, they're very, very subtle, and I'm building up the color. I'm looking for an area, you know, maybe around about here where I can maybe add some more color in here, add some additional blues, etc. I don't want to overdo it, and I urge you to do the same. Don't overdo it just yet, because when we add in our planets, you may want to get back in here then and add in some really fun details. So let's just add in a little variation like this. Let's then add in some stars. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go behind our sun here. So our sun gradient, we've got this area here where we've got that nice sort of red tone here. We're going to create a new layer. I'll rename this one just so we can identify it quick and easily. So stars. And we're going to go to our colors. I'm going to grab this color here, the top of the third column from the right. And we're going to go to our brush, again luminance, but scroll up to the top and go to the light pen. And I always set the light pen to a maximum size and opacity. It's pressure sensitive, so you can press really hard and get like a dot, but you can press really lightly and get teeny tiny little stars in here. And I want to really go ahead and fill out this sky. So we're going to really add in some fun areas of star, varying sizes, little random constellations that you like the look of. And you can come a little bit further down. I would urge you not to really get too far down towards the sunset, but they will sit underneath the red. So although there's a star there, you can see that that one's slowly overlapped by the red tones there. So it's going to actually sort of fade into the sunset, which is going to arguably look very, very cool. But you won't be able to necessarily go all the way down to here. It just won't show. And we're just going to fill it out. Now, of course, we've got our planets to add, and you don't really want to sort of overthink this step too much right now. I'm just going to add in a good area of stars. I know that we're going to end up having a planet here, and I'm also going to add in a large one up here and a smaller one down here. So if you take a look at those for a minute, try not to add any stars too much in those areas, but even if you do, it's not a problem. We're just going to overlap it, of course, with a planet. And you can add in a shooting star in here if you really wanted to. You can really fill this out. Now, I always like to have a good amount of this really small ones, and sometimes they don't come across very well on camera, but a lot of really, really light ones, tiny, tiny little specks in the sky. I think they're the most critical ones sometimes to a sky, where you can just really fill it out with tiny, tiny, tiny amounts of detail. And I think, again, they're the ones that look awesome. So just tapping away, first of all, just add in a few dots. And once we've done a good amount, we're going to leave it like that for a moment. We're going to add in our planet. So let's go ahead and create that. Now, again, I can appreciate your layers are maybe getting a little bit busy. So what you can do if you want to, you can pinch your sunset together. You could pinch your background area together. Don't pinch your stars. If you've got the layers, feel free to keep them. And what we're going to do is we're going to create our planet above this group. So we're going to collapse the sky down for a minute. We'll create 2 new layers and we'll swipe from left to right on both and group them together. And we'll just rename this and we'll call it planet. We're going to go to let's go to the bottom one out of that group. We're going to go to our colors. First of all, let's just grab this color here, the top again of that third column from the right. Let's go ahead and go to our brush. We'll go to calligraphy and we'll go to the monoline brush. It doesn't matter what your brush size is. And I'm going to create my main planet that's going to actually sit here. So I'm going to go ahead and draw in a circle here. Hold my pen down at the end so it snaps, and then pop one finger on the screen to make sure it's a perfect circle. And scale wise, that looks pretty good. And I'll drag and drop the color in. Now I set it as that color just so you could see it. Let's change it to the correct color, and that will be this one here. So the bottom of that third column from the right, and drag that in. And now we're going to build up the same sort of colors that we have for our sky, but onto our planet. So we're going to go ahead and go to the layer above, we'll tap on it and we will clip it. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to go ahead and grab this color here. It is the middle of that far right column. And your brush wants to be set now to airbrushing and the soft brush. And my brush size is going to be around about sort of the 5% mark. We're going to go ahead and add in a very light amount of color around the back area here of the planet. Really, really light with the pressure to start with. We've got to blend these colors together. So let's keep that really light on the back there. And then at the front, we're going to create more of a larger area of color, and I'm just creating like a curve. You can see how my motion of my hand is just constantly going backwards and forwards, but I'm slowly making my way up towards the center area. Now we want to leave this area here pretty dark, so we want to brighten up the very bottom edge and then blend that up towards that little patch that we're going to leave nice and dark. So just up here, and again I've got a good amount of color there on the very back edge as well. Now I'm going to create separate layers. Feel free to just draw them all on the same layer until we get to some of the add effects. But I'm going to create a new layer, tap on it, clipping mask it. I'm going to go to my colors and I'm going to grab this one here in the top right of the palette. And we're going to go ahead and repeat, but just like the sky, where you had the dark tone into the blue, into the green, into the red, we don't want to go as far as the previous color. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and basically do exactly the same as I did before. I'm going to brighten up this bottom left edge. I'm going to curve my pen motion all the way around, but I'm not going to go as far or exceed where that blue was that we did just a second ago. Likewise on the back, we will brighten up that back edge, but I'm not going to go any further than that. So we should end up with a lovely, again, blend of those colors. Now I want that sunset to project up onto here, so I'm going to then go to my colors. I'm going to go ahead and grab the orange though, the middle of the second column from the right. I'm going to go to my layers. I'll create a separate layer and tap on it and clipping mask it. And we're going to go ahead and then add in a little bit of orange down here. These two should now really blend together quite nicely and quite a satisfying glow on here. Now we do have the yellow to add in, so you just need to make this large enough that you think you could then go ahead and add some yellow onto it as well. So I'm just going to add in a good solid amount of color on there, and again just the tiniest little bit on the back here because the lighting and how it would all bounce around, but I think that's enough on the back there. And then we'll go to our colors and grab the yellow at the bottom of the second column from the right. I will keep this on the same layer, it's fine. And just again, in that bottom left area here, just add in a little bit of yellow and blend in that round the very edge there. It's very subtle, I'm trying not to go too far in. I may even need to reduce my brush size down to about sort of 3% just to really yellow up this bottom left area here and let that just blend around. And you can at any point just maybe expand that if you want to, you know, add in a little bit more of the brighter yellow tones a little bit higher. Totally up to you what you want to achieve with your planet. Let's add some texture to this though. Let's go ahead and create a new layer. We're going to go ahead and leave it for a moment. We're going to go to our colors. And what I traditionally do with planets is if I want to add some texture, I always use the Dove Lake brush, but I also then use the base color of the initial planet. So what's the shadow color of the planet? Well, it's actually this color here. It's the bottom of the third column from the right. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to go into the option of textures and we're going to use the Dove Lake brush. I've got the size set to about 6%, and all you need to do is basically create a big square over the top of your planet, like this. We're then going to go ahead and tap on the layer, tap on it and clip it now to the shape of the planet. So now you should start to see a little bit of that texture. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go to our adjustments. We're going to go to the option of liquefy. We're going to use the option of expand here. And the brush size, I've got it set to around about 44. That probably could do with being a bit smaller, about 40. And in the center of the planet, you just want to sort of tap a little bit and then go round in a circle and kind of just expand the texture and push it right up towards the edges. So you should end up with this larger area of texture in the middle, followed by some sort of very small areas on the outside that are compressed based on the curvature of the planet or the moon, whatever it may be. Now we're actually then going to go ahead and tap on this layer and change the blend mode from the option of normal. We're going to bring it all the way down to soft light, which is now going to change that up. It's going to give us far more of the color back. And now you can see that texture there in the colored areas. Now this is why I somewhat separated the layers, because if I go back down to this blue layer here, the very first one that we had clipped, I go back to my brush and change it back to airbrushing and the soft brush. If I go to the color again, the same one, the middle of that first column on the right, if I make that around about 6%, I can now blend that back in now and really lightly in the shadowed area, maybe just reveal a little bit more of that texture by adding in a little bit more blue. And then likewise, if I want to sort of blend that back in again, I can go to the color here in the top right. I can go back to the layer for that and now start to reintroduce a bit more green on top. Again, not exceeding where the blue went previously. And likewise, you could then add more of the orange. You could add in as much or as little as you like with that lighting. Now, we're not done necessarily just yet. We're going to go ahead and create another layer. We're going to tap on it and we're going to clipping mask it, and we're going to change the blend mode from normal to add. This is where you can really punch out the highlights. And we're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab the yellow here at the bottom of that second column from the right. Your brush needs to be the soft airbrush under airbrushing. And you want to just now brighten up this bottom left area here, really showing how that light is bouncing up over there, and maybe a tiny bit on the back. I'm going to round that off at the bottom a little bit more, blend in that light source a little bit like that. So I do have a really bright spot at the bottom, and I'm happy with that. I like that. Now let's go ahead and make this glow. So if you are done with your planet and you are happy with the colors, maybe for example for me, I could go to the orange, add in a tiny bit more orange in this bottom area here, just warm that up a tiny bit. But once you're happy with it, you can then go ahead and flatten it. So we can go to the planet, we can simply tap on the group and we can go to flatten. What we can then do is swipe it to the left and duplicate it, and then swipe that to the left and duplicate it. So you should have 3, and then swipe from left to right on all 3 and group them together. Again, you can now rename this and call it planet, just to keep things nice and organized. Now, what we're going to do is the bottom one out of the 3 planets, we're going to go to our adjustments. We're going to go to Gaussian blur. We're going to swipe from left to right, and we're going to add in a 12% Gaussian blur. So you can see that at the top, you swipe from left to right and that percentage goes up. If we tap away, if we then go ahead and go to the one above it, if we change the blend mode from normal to the option of add, and then repeat, but don't go up to 12%, so go to adjustments, Gaussian blur, and swipe from left to right and add in a 5 or 6% Gaussian blur. You now should have this lovely kind of diffused lighting effect up there. And you can then tap on your adjustments when you're done. Now that is your first planet completely done. And now we can go ahead and we can just collapse that group down. We can swipe the planet to the left and duplicate it. And we can grab our cursor and we can move this around and create different variations. So we can grab the uniform option, we can scale it up in size, we can make it really, really large and push it all the way up here into the top right. Now initially I haven't made it that large, but I quite like the change of scale and how drastic and cool that looks in the sky. So I'm going to make it quite large up here and tap on my cursor when I'm done. Now what we can do is we can tap on this group and we can flatten it. Now some of the lighting effects may get a little bit more dull, but I'm happy with that as it is. We're going to go ahead and go to our adjustments. We're going to go to the option of hue, saturation and brightness. And we're going to go ahead and make some adjustments to this. We're going to bring the hue down to 47% or thereabouts. I'm going to bring the saturation all the way down to around about sort of 24%. And I'm going to bring the brightness down a little bit as well. I'm going to bring that down to about 45%, just to make an adjustment to this one in the sky. And now we've got this kind of more white, almost moon-like color up there, and I'll tap on my adjustments when I'm done. Then what we'll do is we'll repeat. We'll swipe that planet to the left, we'll swipe that to the left and duplicate that group. We'll tap on it and flatten it. We'll grab our cursor, we'll move it across over here to the right hand side. We're going to scale this one down in size. We're going to make it really, really small and put one just over here. And feel free to create as many or as little as you like in the sky. You could even put one up here. The only thing I urge you to do is then just rotate it slightly. So you could put one up there, for example, and point that down. And I think we'll do that. We'll tap on our cursor when we're done. We'll go to our adjustments. We'll go to hue, saturation and brightness again. I'm going to go ahead and move the hue all the way to the right hand side. I'm going to bring that saturation down to about 30%. And we're going to go ahead and adjust the brightness and bring that up a little bit, bring it up to about 56%. And now we've got a little bit more of a red tone up there. Feel free to just mess around as much as you like. Like that looks really good around about the 66%. You could leave it like that with a little bit more of a blue color to it. And you know what? I like how that looks. You can make the changes on the fly as you go. So let's make that 66, 31 and 55. And then again, it's totally up to you. You could add another one over there if you wanted to. You could simply swipe that one to the left and duplicate it, or the planet group again. Duplicate it, tap on one, flatten it down, grab your cursor, and let's make this one really small again, probably the smallest out of the four. Rotate it slightly, leaning to the right. And once we've positioned that there, we'll go back up to our adjustments, hue, saturation, and brightness. I'll make it the red tone I had before, so I'm going to bring it all the way up to max. Bring that saturation down to about 30% and bring that brightness back up to about 56. And I've got a red one in the sky. Now you've got a really cool varying amount of planets and different sort of colors as well, which looks really cool. If we tap on our adjustments when we're done. Now this is where I urge you to then spend as long as you like in the sky group here on the stars layer. Add as many or as little stars as you like, making sure you use this color here at the top of the third column from the right. Go to your brush. Make sure you go back into the option of luminance and the light pen and add as many stars just to fill out the rest of your sky, because it is ultimately done in terms of adding in the planets. You can now work out where you want to add your stars, and maybe we'll adjust some nebulas in a second. So I've gone ahead and done exactly that. I've just added in some more stars. It's a very simple step that we don't necessarily need to do together, but I've just added in a load of stars, lots of nice small ones as well. And as I mentioned, we want to go ahead and just go back to the sort of green tones here of our nebula. So just underneath our stars, we'll go back to the color here in the top right of the palette. We'll go back to our brush and go back into the option of luminance and nebula. And let's go ahead and with a slightly more smaller brush size, around about 5%, you can now get in here and start to think about maybe pressing a little bit firmer here and there and just seeing what kind of little trails, etc. you want to create in the sky. Just variation in sort of the cosmic space up here. So you can add in some brighter areas. I would urge you to build it up, and I'm going to bring that brush size down to around about 4%, just so I can be in full control a little bit more and, you know, take control of where I want to add everything in and how much color here and there. But I'm going to just see if I can have some fun just adding in some sort of nebula effects up in the sky. I wouldn't overdo it, but I wouldn't underdo it at the same time, truthfully. I would add in some good, nice, bright variations, little specks in the sky. Feel free, I've done this previously in another sort of sky tutorial we're using the nebula, where you can then get in here with the nebula in the largest area, sorry, with a smaller brush size is what I meant to say. And you can add in some little sort of weaving lines in and among your brightest spots. So if you've added in a good amount of them, you can create these lovely sort of cracks almost in the sort of sky and have some fun detailing it as much or as little as you like. It's totally up to you. Here, for example, I've got a nice big area here on the right that I can squiggle in some brighter spots in the center of that. And I add in another little fork here that just branches off from there. And you can just create little wiggles and squiggles in the sky, but it really will fill it out. Now, I'll explain why we've been doing this in this particular order, because we want to make sure our sky is absolutely perfect before we reflect it. Because once you reflect it, you know, you'd have to repeat all those steps again. So we're just going back in, just triple checking that we're happy with it and building up all the steps in the sky until we get this effect now. Let's then go ahead and adjust the landscape before we do exactly as I mentioned, reflect it underneath. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to go ahead and we can go ahead and collapse our sky down. We're going to go and into the land group at the top, and we're going to start at the bottom. We've got these hills there in the background. We're going to tap on that and we're going to alpha lock it so we can't paint outside of it. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and grab the bottom color in that second column from the right. Our brush wants to be set to airbrushing and the soft brush. And with a brush size probably around about 5 or 6%, we're going to very lightly just go over the tips of those hills in the background and add in a little bit of yellow on them as if they just blend into the sort of the atmosphere or the sky in the background there. So just a little bit of color on the tops of those. So it goes from like a yellow into a bit of a green like so. Another adjustment we're going to make to a different layer is we're going to go up to this one here. So we're skipping one and moving up to this one here that you can see I'm turning on and off. We're going to go ahead and tap on that and alpha lock it so we can't paint outside of it. We're going to go to our colors and grab the one in the top right of the palette. And we're going to introduce a little bit of a lighter tone in here. So in the middle, just a really, really light amount of pressure just in here, in this central area, and then up on the tips of some of these areas of land over here as well. So just a little bit of a greener hue in the middle here, a little bit of more colourful as well. We're then going to go ahead and move in our layers. We're going to move up a layer, tap on it and alpha lock it. So we're now working with the double peaks. It's a peak on the left and a peak on the right. We're going to go ahead and we're going to go to our colours. We're going to grab the middle colour in the far right column to start with. And we're going to do almost exactly the same process. We're going to go along this land mass here in the middle, and you should slowly start to see it separate itself from the one in front. So I'm just going to go along there, and then I'm going to go up the side of here on that left edge only, and just add in a big area of blue. And you can then also separate this land from it as well. So I'm just going to bring that in with a blue gradient, but I want the darkness to sit over here on the right. So we're just adding a very, very basic highlight in this area here. So along this land mass, up here, up on this side of this sort of pointy mountain area, and then this over here, you can add a little bit into like here, for example, just on that space there, but just enough to separate it. And while we're here, we're also going to introduce this color here in the top right. I will urge you either to create a second layer if you need to for precious reasons, because we want to keep this really, really gentle in here. So a nice light blue, and then a light bit of streak of blue, or green even. I keep getting the two mixed up today, don't I? Up the top here, and then a little bit on here too. So just a tiny adjustments to some of the colors. We're then going to go ahead and move forward a layer one again. So this one here, tap on it and alpha lock it again, so we can't paint outside of it. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab the middle color here in the far right column. And we're going to go just over here on this hillside here, just adding in the lightest amount again until the edge is a little bit brighter than the land in behind it. So you're just brightening this up a tiny bit, enough that then the one in behind is now separated from it nicely. And again, you can just run that along that land just a tiny bit on the top surface if you want. So just a little bit of colour along there. And that should then help them have a little bit more colour to them, a little bit more fun. Now this one on the left, we're going to go ahead and go to that. We're going to tap on it and we're going to alpha lock it. This one has its own colour, so we've tapped on it and alpha locked it. We're going to our colours and we're going to grab this blue here, the middle in the second column. And it's very, very light. It's very, very subtle as well. I'm just going to add in a little bit of this blue on this top area here only, and that's it. So just a little bit here. You should then see it separate itself. Now, at this point, we're good to start reflecting it. So let's do exactly that. Now, there's a couple of things we need to do for our reflection. We need to go to our layers. We need to turn off the top two in this group. So this bit of land over here we were just working on, and the one at the bottom. And we're going to go down to the lake. We're going to create a new layer and tap on it and clip it to the lake. We're then going to go ahead and we're going to swipe down with 3 fingers, go to the option here of copy all, and then swipe down with 3 fingers and go to the option of paste. You won't see any visual change until you go to the option of flip vertical, and we move that down. And then once you move that down, just to the point where you've got the land touching here, that's what I want to achieve. So I don't want that little white gap that I can see there. That's perfect for me. And if we then go ahead and tap on our cursor when we're done, we've got this awesome reflection, and we can bring in the land that we had as well. So we can go ahead and turn on the top 2 layers that we turned off. So that land and that land there. And while we're working with reflections for a moment, let's go ahead and grab this layer here. So this little bit of land just here. Swipe it to the left and duplicate it. Grab it and drag it down to here, just in front of our lake reflection. It will clip itself. That's perfectly fine. We're going to grab our cursor, we're going to flip it vertically and move it down as well until the tips of the land are touching. So I've got this little gap here. I just need to go ahead and just bring them together and tap on my cursor when I'm done. And now we've got our reflections in place. But we now need to go ahead and adjust the water. We need to add some reflections in terms of ripples and so on. So let's go ahead and do exactly that. So we're going to go ahead, and the first layer we've got is the one that we just moved underneath. We're going to tap on that and turn off the alpha lock. We're going to go to our adjustments. We're going to go to the option of motion blur. We're going to drag down in a vertical fashion, because the angle that you draw the motion blur in, so the angle that I go from start to finish, is the angle that it gets adjusted in. And we want to make sure that that motion blur at the top goes to about 24%. So around about there. 22 looks pretty good. Now let's do exactly that. Let's go down to about 22 in a nice vertical fashion. And then we can tap on our adjustments when we're done. And then we're going to go down to the image as well that's clipped. We're going to tap on it, our adjustments, motion blur, and drag down again. Drag down, vertical fashion to 24%. and then we can tap on our adjustments when we're done. You will get this light effect here on the edge. I'm not against that. That's just where the color is coming in from below, and I'm happy with that. I think that looks cool, but the reflection down here looks awesome. Now, we now have our water in play, but we want to make some adjustments to it. First of all, the lake itself, tap on it and invert it back to what its original color was. We want to tap on the image above that's clipped to it, tap on it and bring that down just a smidge or two. So you can bring it down to around about sort of 85% on opacity, and that will just darken it up a little bit from the sky. Let's then go ahead and add in some little ripple effects into the water itself. And to do that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to our colors. We're going to keep this color here, the bottom of the third column from the right. We're going to go to our brush. Now, this is where I've provided you with an additional brush. You can use whatever brush you like, but we've got the Leatherwood edited by myself. Again, if you haven't yet downloaded it, download it in the description down below, and there's also a helpful video on how you can do that. Now, we're going to go ahead and start the brush size around about 3%. And we're just going to go in a horizontal fashion. Now, what we can also do is we can actually go ahead and we can create a new layer. We'll drag it above these layers here. So it's the top clipped one. We can tap on this layer and actually add a drawing assist to it. So now it's going to use the drawing assist of the actual grid. So if I now go horizontal, it's going to make sure it's nice and horizontal. I can't go diagonal. I can only go vertical or horizontal. Now we're going to smudge this brush afterwards, so don't stress too much. What I want you to do is I want you to draw in horizontally here and just draw in lots of very faint lines here, making their way ever so further back in our design. And you can just add in ripple lines after ripple, little dashes here and there. They don't need to be separated too much. You can just add in the tiniest little sort of gaps in between them, as long as they are, you know, nice and horizontal, quite sort of uniformed in a way. But let's just keep going. And as you get further back, try and make sure they're like little dashes. So a little bit smaller for detail, but as you get a little bit closer to the camera or the person that's looking at this, you can make them a little bit larger. I'm going to overlap these areas over here on the right as well. And what we also want to do is create some variation in this. So I'm then going to boost that up to about 6% and then create some larger, really light pressured areas here that are just going to add in some additional sort of more faint areas of the ripples in the water. So these ones are not going to be quite detailed and quite, you know, fine as the previous layer that we were just working on. So I'm now just going back in and just creating some variation, especially down here right in front of us. We can add in some awesome little details here and there. Make sure you go down into the very bottom right of your canvas. Always make sure to go up to the edges. And they look pretty good to me. Let's bring that back down to the 3%. Let's get in some more details in here. Maybe some quite aggressive, quite long streaks in here. The pressure of this pen is very much like hit or miss sometimes. So with this brush, so you can just have to keep trialing it with your pressure, keeping it nice and light though in certain areas. Now don't overdo this one just yet, because I want to also add in some highlights. So yes, we've got shadows, but let's go ahead and create a new layer again, tap on it and clipping mask it. Let's go to our colors and grab this color here in the top of that third column. And we're going to repeat, but just do it in the gaps. So we're going to go ahead and just now draw in some highlights. Now, let's make sure we go back, tap on it and turn on the drawing assist as well. So it's now making sure it's nice and uniform, nice and horizontal. And we're just going to get in here now and just add in some highlighted areas on the ripples as well. So I'm not necessarily looking to add it on top of anything else I've previously done. I'm just looking to add in more lines here and there in the gaps. It doesn't matter if they're touching or even overlapping slightly, that would be perfectly fine. I'm just quite randomly, to be honest with you, just sort of scratching in the details. And again, I'm going to jump up to the 6% mark again, add in some more, the larger size here and there, where we're getting some nice, lovely big reflections in the water. And you can go into your shadows as well, especially when you've got the highlights. Go into your shadows, overlap them in there, because that just shows like a little bit of highlight. It also breaks up the reflection a little bit, where we can then see, you know, that there is a little something layered over the top. What I would also do is just go around this area of land here. If you drew it exactly the same as me, you can just go around that to almost show like the water cracking up against the sort of land there. Now on this layer, we're going to go ahead and simply tap on it and we're going to alpha lock it. So we can't paint outside of what the lines we've already drawn. I'm going to go to my color and grab the yellow at the bottom of the second column from the right and then switch my brush back to airbrushing and the soft brush. And with a 10% brush size, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the drawing assist because that's going to be quite frustrating. So turn off the drawing assist and just blend out the sort of light tone into a nice bright yellow. So we're blending the two together. So nice and yellow in the distance, and then as they get closer, they get a little bit more of these sort of white tones. Let's now go ahead and motion blur these. So we're going to go ahead and tap on this layer that we've just alpha locked and un-alpha lock it. Go up to your adjustments and go to motion blur, swipe from left to right, and we're going to add in a good 30 or 33% motion blur here, nice and horizontal. And then do the same for your shadows. Go up to your shadow layer. We'll go ahead and we'll tap on it. We will go to motion blur and push from left to right. Again, adding in around about sort of a 30 to 33%. And then you should have some lovely ripples in your water. You can tap on your adjustments when you're done. And then what we can go ahead and do is we can go to the one above, so the colored version, which is our highlight. So we're going to change the blend mode from normal. We're going to change it to overlay. And I'm going to duplicate it because I want it to be nice and colorful on the water. And then the one underneath for your shadows, we're going to change that from normal. We're going to change it to the option of pin light. So we're going to go to pin light. And then one more layer here just for our water area. We're going to create a new layer. We're going to go ahead and we're going to tap on it and we will clip it. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab the color here at the bottom of that third column from the right. Our brush wants to be the soft airbrush again under airbrushing. And with about sort of an 8% brush size, I want to sort of get into this area here. Just darken that up a tiny bit, and especially behind this area of land here, just at the bottom. Just want to sort of shadow that in a little bit where that hill's really blocking that light coming into our design. So you end up with like a really sort of shadowed area over here on the left. And that's cool. That will just give us some nice tones. You can, if your line here was a little bit too dark, light even, you can now, for example, just darken that up if you wish. Totally up to you. I don't hate that bright line, so I'm going to leave it. And then I'm also going to just add in a bit of a darker tone over here as well, just a tiny bit. Now, the final little touch to add to this design is a flare. So we're going to go ahead and go to our layers. We can go ahead and go right to the top of them and create a brand new layer. We're going to go ahead and change the blend mode from normal. We're going to change it to color dodge. And we're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab the yellow at the bottom of that second column from the right. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to go into the luminance section again. We're going to go right to the top and use the flare. Maximum opacity. The size is set to about 36%. And I need to go ahead and first of all tap in the middle of the screen to add in the flare. Because then we can move it. So we can move it. And as you move it, notice how it adapts and changes and adjusts to some of the colors. And you end up with this beautiful red flare off to the side. Now, we will be toning this down in a second, but once you move it into position around about sort of here, just sort of peeking from behind this silhouette here and where your mountains are. So once we've got this going on, it's just breaking from behind that hill. We can go ahead and go to the layer. We can tap on it and bring the opacity down so it's not too overpowering. So you could bring that down to around about sort of the 80% mark and you end up with a lovely bright spot there on the left-hand side. And if we now go ahead and go up to our actions, we turn off our canvas, our drawing guide, we tap away, we pinch with 2 fingers, go full screen with 4, and we end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. As always, make sure to tag me in your finished creations over on Instagram, but most importantly, come and share them with the community over on Discord. It's completely free to join, and there's loads of people sharing all their work from my tutorials to other creators and much, much more. As always, make sure to then subscribe to the channel as well for weekly Procreate content. But if you want even more tutorials from me, come and join me over on Patreon, where I've been posting 3 exclusive tutorials every single month to my Patreon supporters. And the catalogue sits over 90 at the time of recording, with more released every single month. The catalogue just continues to grow. You can have your name featured in videos. You get sneak peeks of upcoming tutorials before they come out, but you also get early access to tutorials as well. So make sure to check out that link in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching. And if you like this tutorial here on YouTube, you probably like this one on the screen now. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.